I don't care. It's all good.
We're here in the crypto valley of Zug, and we're here with Brian Behlendorf and of Hyperledger. Nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you as well. Thank you.
And yeah, you did a nice interview on Hyperledger. Maybe for the wider public, we can. What is Hyperledger about?
So Hyperledger is a blockchain technology project. It's all about open source software. It's hosted at the Linux Foundation, which is a 15-year-old industry consortium based in the States but globally operating with over 1,000 different companies involved in the Linux Foundation. And Hyperledger has about 250 different companies involved, all working together on underlying technologies for distributed ledgers and smart contract systems based on this notion that, you know, there's going to be a lot of different blockchains out there, not just one, not just a single cryptocurrency, right? That there'll be ledgers for all of these different applications, and what you want underneath that is common software. So they're easy to stand up, they're easy to do things with, and you can have different governance models. Some of them might be currencies, some of them might just be for supply chains, some of them might be for tracking real-world assets, all sorts of different use cases. But underneath, the technology should be common and shared.
All right, and what kind of solutions, or of course, what kind of solutions or partnerships are you looking for? I mean, of course, Linux is like a brand, of course. So,
Yeah.
what are you looking for?
So, obviously the way open source software works, right, is you get volunteer developers getting together, not out of charity, but because their companies often depend upon using this code, right? And so we act as kind of air traffic control, you know, giving them a kind of a virtual place to kind of coordinate their efforts, some degree of process as well when it comes to testing, when it comes to looking for security bugs, when it comes to doing the kinds of things that enterprises need to be able to trust software, right? And to help hopefully do for this space what Linux did for the operating system space, which is helped consolidate, helped you know, take a lot of different operating systems out there and replace it with one common operating system, and be everywhere from phones to supercomputers, that sort of thing. So the kinds of partnerships we forge, well, first off, anybody's free to use our software. They don't have to ask us for permission. They don't need to buy a token. They don't need to do anything. They can go off and set up all these different networks. Our hope is that as they start using this, they're going to work with us to improve it, to fix bugs, to add features, that kind of thing. And that's exactly what over 100 different companies have done. Some of them invest a lot, like IBM, which is now using this as their core blockchain infrastructure. Others are startups all over the world, in the US, here in Europe, in China, who are tackling things in, I mentioned supply chain, global finance, digital identity. I mean, in every sector, you can see a different use case where coming up with a common system of record, a common ledger between participants in that market is really important. And so we see people using our stuff in education, in environmental monitoring, in government applications. And that's what, I mean, that's what's really nice, is the software is pretty flexible and pretty generalized. Yeah, and so we also have members of our consortium, companies that pay to join. You know, about 200 have done that so far. And
Because open source is not about charity, you said.
it's not about charity, right? It's about collective self-interest, you know, or you could even say enlightened self-interest, right? These companies realize that, yeah, what they're creating, other people will be able to use for free, but enough people will contribute back that you get this virtuous cycle going, right? And that's the kind of point. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting stuff. I mean, one of the topics you talked about during your talk was this sovereign government identity. Yeah, this is one of your focus topics at the moment. Why? Why is this important?
So at Hyperledger, there's one of the 10 technology code bases we have is something called Hyperledger Indy. And it's a technology for building a distributed digital identity network. And it's in production use today by a nonprofit called the Sovereign Foundation, which is setting up kind of an overlay network that allows you to connect identities on one ledger with identities on another. And do that in a way where you can share information about yourself on one ledger to another and keep a history of who you shared that with and who you grant permissions to.
So for instance, just sorry to interrupt, but you can just data from one blockchain interoperable with another.
Let's say on one blockchain you have a government issuing a passport or a birth certificate, and you have another ledger that is about buying and selling things, and part of that is alcohol, right? Well, you want to be able to show that you're over the age of 18 or 21, whatever it is in this country. Is it 16? Well, so instead of showing your complete passport or your complete birth certificate, you'd really only want to show something that's provable that says you're over the age, you're a legal age in order to be able to buy this. Because if I give the person I'm buying all that information, now I'm leaking that information, and that person can collect that and do other things with that, right? That's kind of bad. I want to be able to just show them something selective, and so this technology uses a blockchain to kind of collect this data, record this data, but not to store it, not to create like a GDPR problem, right? Because you don't want to store personal information there, but to store private keys, to store signatures and pointers and hashes that allow you to, when I show you, if you're the store selling me alcohol, allow you to look at this claim that I really am over the age of 21 and verify the integrity of that, right? And so this is a really different approach to digital identity. It's something that's being called self-sovereign identity, and it's a concept that's spanning a lot of different companies and standards and technologies, and so we're happy just to be playing a supportive role in that.
Nice. What does it mean actually for the existing powers in Silicon Valley as well? I mean, the whole data privacy. I mean, what does it mean for them? For Google, Facebook, even?
Well, there have been technology waves before, right? And one thing that's constant in Silicon Valley is change. So I'm not too worried about them. I think they certainly have enough cash to be able to figure out business models, and no one is saying that consumers shouldn't be able to willingly give them their data. I think what's changing is this default assumption that many of the companies have, not just in Silicon Valley, but everywhere. That whole meme of data is the new oil. The subtext to that everybody heard was, therefore I must hoard it, right? And we have to get out of this addiction to data, I think. We have to get out of this addiction to other people's data that we get without their consent. If we get their consent, no problem, right? And that's already the standard in healthcare, for example. You have to get people's consent in healthcare. That should be true for a lot of other types of data. And there's nothing that these companies do today that they won't be able to do in the future. They just need to be upfront about it. It's what the GDPR requires, and it's really what civilized society requires.
So one last question. What do you think the blockchain technology will be the most disruptive? I mean, some say supply chain, financial sector, or various sectors probably.
Well, it won't really be a sectoral change, I don't think. We live in an era of declining trust, right? People trust their government less now than they did 20 years ago. I mean, survey after survey shows this. But they also trust doctors less than they did 20 years ago. They trust lawyers less than they did. They trust brands less than they did 20 years ago. And we, as a society, if we lose too much trust, we lose our ability to function as a society. Like, things work really well when we know that the food that we eat at a restaurant, we don't have to worry might be tainted, right? All these kinds of systems. And if we're seeing this straight line decline in trust, we're going to need digital systems that help us reestablish some of that trust by making it harder to be fraudulent, making it harder to post up a fake, health safety kind of like validation check on your, like if the restaurant here said, 100%, healthcare check, right? Well, how do you know that that's true or not, right? Or they posted to Yelp. Well, how does Yelp even know? So blockchain technology gives us an opportunity, I think, to build systems that allow us to verify the integrity of claims that are made about the world, right? Whether it's did this pass healthcare specs, or is the water quality clean, or when this company is raising money, like what is the background of their founders, right? It allows us to kind of more intelligently deal with this data and build more interesting systems and more verifiable and more self-auditing systems. And I think with that, we'd have a major positive impact on society.
All right. One last question. What do you think the space will be in 3 to 5 years? I mean, you said it feels like 96, 97.
Yeah, it's hard to draw straight line comparisons because in some ways it's the investment climate of 1999 where it felt like Las Vegas, everybody making a ton of money and like a big fear of missing out and like, throw in and hodl, right? Whereas to me, it feels more like Chicago where it's like Chicago's not flashy. Chicago, like, people worry about supply chains, they worry about insurance, they worry about like the part of the economy that actually creates the substance that then we all get to go party about in Vegas, right? And so in that respect, it's still earlier, but we're already seeing production deployments of Hyperledger technologies in a lot of different sectors, and so I'm really encouraged by that. It feels like it's that crossing the chasm from experiment and is there value here to people actually now having things that will be able to say this created real value. You know, this is real ROI, so to speak.
Right. Thank you very much, Brian, for your time, and all the best.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.
Right.